The door in the tree. The courtyard was quiet, wrapped in the soft glow of late afternoon. A golden haze shimmered across the cracked sidewalk, where the roots of the great tree pushed up through the concrete like the fingers of something ancient and slow. Its trunk was thick and gnarled, big enough to climb, big enough to vanish inside if you tried hard enough. That's what Bryan always said. Silas leaned his back against the warm bark, legs drawn up, eyes half closed, as he listened to the sounds of summer. Distant traffic, a lawn sprinkler ticking somewhere out of sight, the buzz of a fly orbiting a melted patch of eye mop syrup on the ground below. Bryan sat a few feet away, perched higher on the same branch, swinging his legs and slurping the last of his blueberry fizz from an enormous cup labeled Incredible Mountain of Pancakes. It had a cartoon stack of syrup-drenched pancakes, so high they curved around the sides of the cup like a tower. "You think if we stay up here long enough," Bryan said, peering out over the complex, "they'll forget we exist?" Silas shrugged. "Maybe. That'd be cool," Bryan said, tipping his head back. "We could just live in the tree, like weird little raccoons." "You already eat like one," Silas murmured. Bryan laughed and tossed a crumpled napkin at him. It missed, fluttered down onto a lower branch, then to the ground. For a while, they didn't speak, just listened. The tree creaked gently in the breeze, its leaves catching the light like bits of green stained glass. "I like it here," Silas said at last. Bryan nodded, but didn't say anything. His gaze had shifted toward the apartment stairwell. The metal was rusting at the joints, worn down by years of footsteps, arguments, groceries carried too fast. But today, it looked different. The light hit it strange, a shadow where there shouldn't be one. "Hey," Bryan said, eyes narrowing. "You ever think that staircase hums?" Silas blinked, turned to look. "What?" "I'm serious," Bryan said, pointing with his straw. "Like when the sun hits it just right. I swear I hear something. Kinda like singing, real quiet. You never hear that?" Silas frowned. The stairwell sat still in the sunlight. Ordinary, empty. But the more he stared, the more he thought. Maybe just the wind. "I think you've had too much sugar," Silas said. Bryan grinned. Silas stayed behind after Bryan climbed down, saying he needed 10 more minutes of peace before dinner ruined it. Bryan had rolled his eyes, said something about raiding the fridge, and disappeared into the apartment stairwell with his usual boundless energy. Now alone, Silas listened to the wind move through the leaves. He trailed his fingers along the bark, absent-mindedly tracing the faint etchings he and Bryan had carved over the years. Their names, dumb symbols, a jagged lightning bolt that had once been a dinosaur. Some had faded, others were covered in moss, but one stood out, one he didn't remember carving. It wasn't deep, but it was precise. A perfect little spiral, no bigger than a dinner plate. The lines were too clean, too smooth. Not like anything they'd ever scratched in with a stick or spork. It shimmered faintly when the sunlight hit it just right, almost like it had been burned in. Silas blinked, leaned closer. There was something odd about it. The spiral didn't feel like part of the tree. It felt layered, like it had depth, like if he touched it, it might turn, or sink, or pull him in. He reached out slowly. Fingertips hovered a breath away. A breeze picked up. The tree creaked. And for a split second, no more than a heartbeat, he felt something behind his back shift. Not the branch, not the bark, something beneath it, moving. He snatched his hand back. The spiral pulsed once, softly, then it stopped. Silas scrambled down from the tree faster than he meant to, heart thudding in his chest. When his feet hit the grass, he didn't look back. The spiral didn't show up again. Not the next day, not the one after that. For a while, Silas wondered if it had ever been there at all. He stopped himself from bringing it up to Bryan. He knew what he'd say. "Creepy trees are the best kind. Next time, we're jumping in with flashlights and snacks." But then came Saturday. The sun was low, slipping past the roofline of the apartment complex, and Bryan had insisted they watch the sky change colors from their usual perch in the tree. He brought a half-eaten pancake from IMOP, wrapped in foil, and said it was spiritually important that they eat it at sunset. Silas rolled his eyes, but went along with it. They climbed up as always, settling in with practiced ease. The bark was warm. The branches groaned softly in the wind. Everything felt normal. Until Bryan said, "Hey." His voice was different, not loud, not joking. Silas turned. Bryan was staring at the trunk, just a few feet from where they sat. And there it was again, the spiral. But this time, it was open. Where once there had been nothing but rough bark, now there was an outline. A thin, elegant seam had split the trunk like a doorway, perfectly shaped, just wide enough for a person to slip through. The spiral sat at the center like a lock, pulsing gently with a faint amber light. Neither of them moved. The world around them felt like it had gone underwater, muffled, heavy. Bryan whispered, "Do you see that?" Silas nodded, throat tight. "It's real," Bryan said. His voice was full of something between fear and excitement. "Silas, that's a door." Silas pulled back slightly. "We shouldn't..." Bryan was already on his feet. "Bryan!" But it was too late. His friend was already standing in front of it, fingers brushing the spiral. The light pulsed brighter. The seam widened with a low, earthy creak. Bryan grinned. "You coming or what?" Silas didn't answer. He couldn't. "Suit yourself," Bryan said, and stepped inside. The bark folded around him like liquid wood. Silas sat frozen, staring at the place where his friend had vanished. Then he heard it. A scream. Muffled, warped, like it was coming from behind glass, or underwater, or somewhere else entirely. Silas's stomach dropped. He stood, took one hesitant step toward the door. It was still there, still open, still waiting, and without thinking anymore, he took a breath and jumped in. Falling wasn't like falling. It was like sliding sideways through water that wasn't wet, through light that didn't stay still. Colors reversed, shadows bent inwards. The air buzzed, but not with sound, with memory. Silas tried to scream, but it came out in someone else's voice, a younger version of himself calling for Bryan from summers ago. Then, suddenly, stillness. Silas landed on something soft, grass maybe. But when he pushed himself up, he realized it wasn't grass at all. It was leaves, pressed against a surface like glass. Above him was the sky. But not the sky. The sky was below. A vast field of stars shimmered beneath the ground, while above, where the earth should have been, hung twisted black roots, dangling down like chandeliers from a canopy of nothing. The tree was upside down. Silas turned in a slow circle. He stood on a narrow pathway suspended in the middle of this inverted world. Strange, glowing flora drifted like jellyfish through the air. Some of them blinked, others listened. He wasn't sure how he knew that, but he felt it. Everything here was watching. And then, from somewhere ahead, a voice echoed. But it didn't come after the sound of footsteps. It came before. "Bryan!" Silas called out, voice trembling. The echo repeated it back instantly. "Bryan!" Then again, this time behind him. "Bryan!" Silas froze. The echoes weren't bouncing. They were tracking him. He started walking, the path bent in impossible directions, spiraling sideways without him noticing. Gravity twitched beneath his feet. Sometimes it felt like he was walking on the sky. Other times, on old carpet. Once on something that breathed. He kept moving forward. There was no other direction. And as he walked, the tree behind him faded from view until it was gone. There was no going back now. The path opened into a clearing. Or maybe it wasn't a clearing, just a place where the strange, not grass, shimmered like water, surrounded by tall, crooked trees that swayed even though there was no wind. Their leaves didn't rustle. They clicked like teeth. And in the center of the clearing stood children. 3 of them. 2 were standing, 1 crouched, drawing something into the soft, shifting ground with a branch. They looked wrong. Silas stepped closer. None of them moved. He squinted. The first child had curly brown hair and a striped shirt. The second had messy blonde hair and a red t-shirt. And the third, crouched and focused, was humming something under his breath. A song Silas knew. A song he and Bryan had made up. He froze. They looked just like them. The Silas thing lifted its head and smiled. But the smile was slightly too wide. Not in a monstrous way, but in a way that didn't feel earned, like it had seen a picture of what smiling was supposed to look like and copied it. Silas took a step back. The Bryan thing cocked its head, then mimicked him. Stepped back, then forward again. And so did it. They moved when he moved. They breathed when he breathed. But delayed, half a second off. Then all 3 spoke at once, voices just slightly too high, just slightly too slow. "Are you here for the forgetting?" Silas shook his head, backing away. "No," he said. "I'm looking for my friend." The mirror Silas leaned in, eyes too glossy. "We are your friend." The mirror, Bryan giggled, but it was the exact giggle Bryan had made 2 days ago when he tried to balance a cup on his head. Word for word. Sound for sound. The crouching version of himself, the third copy, stood slowly, turned. Its eyes were completely black. Silas ran. He didn't look back. Silas didn't know how long he ran, only that the world around him seemed to stretch and compress with every step. The path narrowed, then widened, then vanished entirely. He found himself standing at the base of a metal staircase that curled upward like a corkscrew, vanishing into the roots above. The stairs looked familiar. Too familiar. They were almost identical to the ones at his apartment complex. Same rusted railings, same dent on the third step, same creak when he placed his foot down. But when he reached the top, it led to the base again. He blinked. He was standing at the bottom. Again. He tried climbing faster, skipping steps. He looked over the railing. No ground, no sky, only the swirling dark beneath him and the pulsing roots overhead. When he reached the top again, he was back at the bottom. His hands were trembling now. Then the light changed. It dimmed, not gradually, but all at once like a dying flashlight. Shadows grew sharper, longer. He turned quickly. There was something in the stairwell with him. Not a sound, not a breath. Just the sense of being watched. Closely. Like something had leaned close enough to kiss the back of his neck, but hadn't touched him yet. Silas didn't move. He squinted, trying to make out a shape, but the thing was always just out of the corner of his eye. Each time he looked directly, it was gone. But when he turned away, it moved. He caught a flicker in the reflective surface of his IMOP cup. Just a glint. It was tall, thin, bent backward, and it only moved when he wasn't looking. His heart hammered. He set the cup on the ground, angled toward the stairwell behind him. Then, walking slowly, he watched its reflection. And there it was. A shape crawling along the stairs like a spider with two long limbs, dragging its head behind it like a balloon filled with water. It moved silently, but it was definitely getting closer. Silas turned sharply, face to face with nothing, empty stairs. But the IMOP cup shook slightly. He didn't stop to think. He ran, and this time, at the top of the stairwell, there was no loop. There was a door, a heavy wooden one, carved into the side of a root wall. He didn't look back. He flung it open and disappeared inside. The door slammed behind him, and for a long time after, the IMOP cup sat there, trembling, then finally rolled off the step and disappeared into the void below. The door closed behind Silas with a whisper, and the light changed again. It wasn't dark, but it wasn't light either. The walls around him pulsed faintly, made of twisted wood and shadow. He stood in a massive hollow chamber, larger than any room could be. Bigger on the inside, his mind whispered. Shelves lined the curved walls, but they didn't hold books. They held bottled whispers. Delicate glass vials glowed faintly, each one swirling with fragments of voices, half-forgotten stories, lonely jokes, the way someone once said your name when they were proud of you. Silas moved carefully between the shelves. He reached for one. As he touched it, the voice inside spilled out. His mother, calling him in for dinner, years ago. The exact tone, the warmth, the distance. The whisper vanished. So did the glow. He realized then, each bottle could only be opened once. He stepped deeper into the library. That's when he saw Bryan. Sitting on a low platform made of gnarled roots, staring into a glass orb that floated above his lap. His hair was messier than usual, his eyes distant, too distant. "Bryan," Silas called. No response. Silas approached slowly, heart pounding. "Bryan," he said again, softer this time. The orb shimmered. Inside it was a looping memory. The two of them laughing under the tree, arguing over who got the last IMAP bite. Bryan pretending to faint dramatically in defeat. Bryan blinked. "Silas?" His voice cracked like he hadn't used it in days. "You okay?" Silas asked, kneeling beside him. Bryan looked down. "I couldn't remember your name. Just now. For like a whole minute." Silas swallowed. "It's okay. I'm here now." A rustle above. From between the shelves, a figure descended. Floating, not walking. It was tall and thin, wearing layers of scrolls and paper like robes. Its face was a smooth white mask, cracked down the center. In its long fingers, it held a quill made of bone. The archivist. It tilted its head at them. "You shouldn't be here," it said, voice like pages turning in the dark. "We're leaving," Silas replied quickly, helping Bryan to his feet. The archivist glided closer. "You've taken what was not yours. This place is for the forgotten." "We're not forgotten," Silas said. "We're not staying." "You misunderstand," the archivist said, drifting toward Bryan. "He already has." Silas stepped in front of him. "No." The archivist paused. Then it reached forward and plucked something from the air, a thread of sound. Bryan's laughter. It twisted it gently between two fingers, then tucked it into a fresh vial. Bryan staggered. "What was that?" "His name," the archivist said. "And now, yours." Silas didn't wait. He grabbed Bryan's hand, and they ran. They ran until their lungs burned, through twisting hallways made of bark and memory, beneath hanging lanterns filled with dreamlight. The library vanished behind them. The archivist didn't follow, but its presence lingered, like the smell of old paper clinging to their clothes. The ground shifted beneath their feet. One moment, they were in a corridor. The next, they were back in the clearing. But something had changed. The mirrored children were gone. The sky above was darker than before, like ink diluted with tears. At the center of the clearing, where the path ended, stood a figure. Not a monster, not a guardian. Something else. It stood tall but hunched, wrapped in robes woven from leaves and memory scraps. Its face was not a face, just the soft curve of bark and shadow, like something that had chosen not to be seen. Around it, the air pulsed gently with the rhythm of a heartbeat. The caretaker. Silas felt it before he heard it. A presence inside his thoughts. A question. "Why do you wish to leave?" Bryan stepped back. Silas steadied him. "We don't belong here," Silas said aloud. "We never did." The caretaker tilted its head. "All who enter this place become part of it. You remember it now. That is enough." "No," Silas said. "We don't belong to you." "But I remember you," the caretaker replied. "I remember your voices, your laughter, your carving on the tree. I remember everything you've forgotten." A pause, a breath, and I am so very lonely. Bryan's hand gripped Silas's tighter. "Is it gonna keep us here?" Silas looked up into the faceless bark. He saw no malice, only hunger, not for food, but for connection, for company. "No," Silas said. "You don't need to keep us. We'll remember you." "I'll say that," the caretaker whispered. "But we mean it," Bryan added. You were real. All of this was real. Silas stepped forward. His voice was steady. We'll tell stories about this place, even if no one believes us. That's a kind of remembering, right? The caretaker was silent. Then, slowly, it nodded. The bark split open behind them, forming a doorway, not of light, but of bark and breath and fading echoes. A way home. Then go, the caretaker whispered. But remember, nothing ever leaves unchanged. They walked toward the door, side by side. And as they passed through, the caretaker's final whisper followed them. Don't forget me. They landed in the grass with a soft thud. Bryan first, then Silas, a breath later. The air was warm again. Summer wind, the sound of a sprinkler, the faint clatter of a shopping cart being wheeled into an apartment. Everything was exactly as it had been, and yet not. Silas sat up slowly, blinking against the sunlight. The great tree stood behind them, silent and unmoving. No spiral, no doorway, just bark, thick and ancient. Bryan looked around, breathing hard. Did we? He started, then stopped. Was that real? Silas nodded. Yeah. They both sat there, quiet, listening. The breeze stirred the leaves. The metal staircase gleamed in the sun. From an open window above, a voice called out, Silas, dinner! It was his dad. Silas looked down at his hands, still scraped from the stairwell, still dusted with strange pollen from the other world. He stood up slowly. Only a few hours had passed. That's all. Bryan walked beside him, glancing up at the tree once more. I don't think I can ever eat pancakes again, he muttered. Silas gave him a faint smile. Liar. Okay, maybe just no syrup. They walked toward the building, the sky beginning to shift toward orange. But just before they reached the stairs, Silas paused. There, under the metal landing, something moved. Just a flicker, a shape slipping between shadows. When he turned to look, nothing was there. But the breeze sounded different for a moment, like it was humming, like a voice on the edge of memory. They climbed the stairs slowly, as if waking from a strange dream. The apartment door creaked as they opened it. Familiar smells drifted out. Garlic, something frying in a pan, the faint sweetness of cornbread in the oven. Silas's dad was in the kitchen, humming the same song he always hummed when he cooked. He didn't even glance up. You boys back in time for food? He said. Silas swallowed. Yeah. Bryan flopped onto the couch, grabbing the remote like nothing had happened. He flipped through the channels without really watching. Silas stood in the hallway for a moment, eyes drifting to the mirror above the shoe rack. In it, he looked mostly the same, but not entirely. His reflection blinked a beat too slow. Or maybe he just imagined it. He turned away and walked into the kitchen. Later, after dinner, they sat on the floor of Bryan's room with the window cracked open. Night had settled in fully. Crickets chirped. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked twice. I don't think anyone would believe us, Bryan said softly. Silas nodded. But we'll remember, he said. Bryan glanced at him. We will, right? Silas didn't answer right away. He looked out the window at the tree. A few of its leaves shifted, though there was no wind. "Yeah," he said. "We will." The two boys sat in silence. Behind them, on the nightstand, Bryan's IMOP cup began to tremble slightly, just for a second. Then it was still again. The end, for now.